In the annals of American history, few battles resonate with such profound implications as Gettysburg. Yet the narrative surrounding it is riddled with controversy and conflicting accounts. Major General Winfield Scott Hancock's dispatch, emerging from the chaos of July 1863, serves not only as a military report, but as a searing indictment of leadership failures that left Union forces teetering on the brink of disaster. As Hancock meticulously details the disarray that plagued his command, he exposes a troubling reality. Decisions made in the heat of battle often stemmed from miscommunication and hubris among high-ranking officers. This is not merely a recounting of events, it is a stark revelation of how ambition and incompetence can intertwine to shape the fate of nations. In this critical examination, we delve into Hancock's insights, challenging the glorified narratives of heroism and valor to confront the uncomfortable truths lurking beneath the surface of one of history's most studied conflicts. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about leadership in war and the price paid for its failures at Gettysburg. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Headquarters, 2nd Corps, July 5, 1863. I have the honor to send you 22 flags that were captured by our Corps during the recent battle at Gettysburg. Very respectfully, your obedient servant, E.P. Brownson, Captain and Aide-de-Camp. General, I am honored to present this report detailing the operations of my command from June 28th until July 5th. On the morning of June 28th, the 2nd Corps marched from near Sugarloaf Mountain in Maryland with orders for Major General Hooker to set up camp at Frederick. When we were near Montesi Junction, Major General Meade ordered us to camp nearby as he took command of the Army that day. On the morning of June 29th, we received orders for the Corps to march at 4 a.m. and move to Frizzleburg. However, an accident delayed the delivery of this order, and we did not begin moving until 8 a.m. At 10 p.m. that night, we halted for the night 1 mile beyond Uniontown after accomplishing a march of over 30 miles with our entire train. Unfortunately, we did not reach Frizzleburg because it was much farther from Montesi Junction than what was indicated by the maps we had. While at Uniontown, I learned that Stuart was at Westminster with a heavy force of cavalry and several guns. I promptly communicated this important information to the Major General commanding. The Corps remained in camp at Uniontown on June 30th. On the morning of July 1st, my command marched to Taneytown and set up a bivouac around 11 a.m. I then personally proceeded to General Meade's headquarters. Upon reporting to him, I was informed about his intentions regarding engaging in battle with the enemy. The orders for preparatory movements were then ready for issue. Just a few minutes before 1 p.m., I received orders to go to the front and assume command of the 1st, 3rd, and 11th Corps, due to the unfortunate death of Major General Reynolds. Having been fully informed by the Major General commanding about his intentions, I was instructed by him to give necessary directions upon my arrival at the front for moving troops and trains toward the rear in line with the battle he had selected if I deemed it wise to do so. If I found that the ground was suitable and circumstances made it wise, I was directed to establish a line of battle at Gettysburg. After turning over command of the 2nd Corps to Brigadier General Gibbon under instructions from General Meade at 1:10 p.m., I was on my way to Gettysburg accompanied by my personal aides, Lieutenant Colonel Morgan, Chief of Staff of the 2nd Corps, along with the signal party of our Corps under Captain Hall's command. At around 3 p.m., I arrived at Gettysburg and assumed command. At this moment, both the 1st and 11th Corps were retreating through town while closely pursued by enemy forces. The cavalry led by General Buford occupied a strong position on the plains to the left of Gettysburg, effectively covering the rear of our retreating corps. The 3rd Corps had not yet arrived from Emmetsburg. Immediately upon my arrival, orders were given to establish a line of battle on Cemetery Hill, with skirmishers occupying that part of town directly in front of us. The positions just on the southern edge of Gettysburg overlooked both the town and commanded access to Emmitsburg and Taneytown roads, as well as Baltimore Turnpike. These were already partially occupied upon my arrival, following directions from Major General Howard. We experienced some difficulty in forming up the troops from the 11th Corps. Through my determined efforts, a strong enough line was formed to prevent the enemy from launching any serious attack on our position. They advanced a battle line briefly east of the Baltimore Turnpike, but our artillery fire easily halted them. I received significant support in forming these lines from Major General Howard, Brigadier Generals Warren and Buford, and officers from General Howard's command. As soon as the enemy displayed their battle line, Wadsworth's division from the 1st Corps and a battery, believed to be the 5th Maine, were positioned on Emmitsburg Road just across the turnpike, fully commanding this approach. This vital position was held by the division for the rest of the operations near Gettysburg. The remainder of the 1st Corps, under Major General Doubleday, was stationed on both sides of Taneytown Road, connecting with the left of the 11th Corps, which occupied parts of Cemetery Hill, immediately adjacent to the Baltimore Turnpike. Are you tired of struggling with stubborn dirt and grime on your vehicle? Introducing the Car Wash Water Gun from Shenzhen Jianche Supei Technology Company Limited, your ultimate cleaning companion. This innovative tool connects to any water source and features multiple cleaning modes, making it easy to reach those tough spots. With its high-pressure system, you can conserve water while achieving a sparkling clean finish. And the best part? It's cordless. Enjoy enhanced mobility as you tackle every inch of your car without being tethered to a power outlet. The link to purchase is on the screen now and in the description below, so don't miss out. Transform your car washing experience with our Car Wash Water Gun, where convenience meets efficiency. Get yours today and see the difference. A division from the 12th Corps, led by Brigadier General Williams, arrived as these arrangements were being finalized and was established according to orders from Major General Slocum. Some distance to the right and rear of Wadsworth's divisions, Brigadier General Geary's division from the 12th Corps arrived later but could not communicate with Major General Slocum. I directed this division to high ground to the right and rear of Round Top Mountains, overseeing both Gettysburg and Emmitsburg roads, as well as the Gettysburg and Taneytown roads behind us. The supply trains for all troops under my command were ordered to move to the rear, so they would not interfere with any troop movements directed by the Major General commanding. I then sent my aide, Major Mitchell, to General Meade to inform him of our situation and to assure him that I would hold our position until nightfall. Shortly after that, I sent a detailed communication to the Major General commanding via Captain Parker of my staff, providing all relevant information I had and informing him that our positions at Gettysburg were very strong. However, I noted that our position had a disadvantage in that it could be easily flanked, and left him responsible for deciding whether to engage in battle at Gettysburg or at another location he preferred. Between 5 and 6 o'clock, once my arrangements were complete, Major General Slocum arrived on the field. Considering my duties had concluded, I transferred command to him. Shortly after this transfer, the head of the 3rd Corps became visible on the Emmitsburg Road. As darkness approached, I set out for Army headquarters still located at Taneytown, which was about 13 miles away. Upon arrival, I reported in person to General Meade. I learned that he had already ordered the Corps in the rear to advance immediately toward Gettysburg and was preparing to go there himself. The 2nd Army Corps had marched from Taneytown toward Gettysburg at 1:30 p.m. and set up camp for the night about 3 miles behind the town. The march resumed at daylight, and I rejoined the Corps before it arrived on the field around 7 a.m. on the 2nd. The troops were quickly positioned, with the right near the Emmitsburg Road to the west of Cemetery Hill, connecting on the right with the 11th Corps, and on the left with the 3rd Corps. The battle line extended along the crest from Cemetery Hill's left to Round Top Mountain, where the ground was less elevated. Brigadier General Hayes commanded the 3rd Division on the right, Brigadier General Gibbon led the 2nd Division in the center, and Brigadier General Caldwell commanded the 1st Division on the left. The Corps' batteries were arranged from right to left as follows: Woodruff's, Arnold's, Cushing's, Brown's, and Reuter's. Each division had one of its own brigades in reserve behind it. Sharp skirmishing occurred at intervals throughout the morning, especially in front of Hayes's division, where we captured several enemy soldiers. Our artillery was frequently engaged, but no significant fighting occurred until 3 p.m., when the 3rd Corps advanced toward Emmetsburg Road and became heavily involved in combat. Later, the 5th Corps engaged near Round Tops to support the 3rd Corps from a distance behind them. Directed by General Meade to send a division to assist 3rd Corps and report to General Sykes of the 5th Corps, I dispatched Caldwell's 1st Division to the conflict area. The division was positioned by one of Major General Sykes's staff officers. Once it could form lines of battle, Caldwell's division advanced its left along the foot of Round Top Mountains and steadily pushed back the enemy until they turned our right flank. This was due to an enemy column that had moved unobserved around a considerable distance to our right and almost to our rear, forming a line of battle that soon forced our division to retreat, suffering nearly half its strength in losses. 3 out of 4 brigade commanders were disabled. Brigadier General Zook, a brave officer, was killed early in the fight. Colonel E. Cross of the 5th New Hampshire Volunteers, commanding the 1st Brigade, was mortally wounded after displaying great courage on many battlefields. Colonel J. R. Brooke of the 53rd Pennsylvania, commanding the 4th Brigade, was slightly injured. General Meade ordered that Caldwell's division return to its original position after being relieved by the 5th Corps. It was reformed some distance behind our battle line, but did not return until after dark, when I ordered it back to its morning position. The 3rd Corps had advanced far beyond our original battle line, while Caldwell's division had been detached, leaving a large gap on the left side of the 2nd Division without troops. To partially address this issue, General Gibbon extended his line leftward by adding his reserve brigade. The right of the 3rd Corps rested near a brick house close to Emmetsburg Road, significantly ahead of Gibbon's division. The general direction of our line ran parallel to that road. To strengthen the connection between the right of the 3rd Corps and General Harrow's left, General Gibbon sent 2 regiments, the 15th Massachusetts, led by Colonel G. H. Ward, and the 82nd New York Volunteers, commanded by Colonel Houston. They were assigned to occupy a crest to the right of the brick house, which was significantly reinforced by a low breastwork made from nearby fences. Brown's artillery, Battery B of the 1st Rhode Island, was positioned in the rear and slightly to the left of these 2 regiments. Due to the advanced position of the 3rd Corps, a considerable gap formed between its left flank and the right of the 5th Corps. This gap allowed an enemy column to turn Caldwell's division's right flank. Around this time, General Meade informed me that General Sickles had been wounded and instructed me to take command of the 3rd Corps, in addition to my own command. As a result, General Gibbon resumed immediate command of the 2nd Corps, while General Birney took charge of the 3rd Corps. I had just received orders from General Meade to send a brigade to assist General Birney, whose division occupied the extreme left of Sickles' corps, and to send 2 regiments to General Humphreys, who commanded that corps' right flank. I quickly led the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, under Colonel Willard, intended for General Birney, toward the left side of the original line of battle for the 3rd Corps. As I was about to proceed with it to the front, I encountered General Birney, who informed me that his troops had been driven back and had abandoned their position. General Birney then moved to the rear to regroup his command, while General Humphreys' smaller force remained in position. The enemy forces that had turned Caldwell's right flank and pushed back the left side of the 3rd Corps now approached our original line of battle. Humphreys' command was forced back while fiercely contesting their ground. The two regiments sent from the 2nd Division to assist General Humphreys, the 19th Massachusetts under Colonel Devereux, and the 42nd New York under Colonel Malone, were still en route but faced musket fire. Noticing that General Humphreys' command was retreating rapidly, they formed lines of battle and fired a few volleys at the advancing enemy before retiring in good order back to their positions within the 2nd Corps, having sustained significant losses. The enemy pressed them closely enough that several soldiers from these regiments were captured as prisoners. The two regiments and batteries advanced by General Gibbon near the Brick House provided excellent service in protecting General Humphreys' flank and preventing it from being cut off from our line of battle. The enemy's attack was focused on their flanks, forcing the two regiments to retreat with significant losses. Colonels Ward and Houston were both killed, and one of their cannoneers was temporarily captured by the enemy. I instructed General Humphreys to form his command on the ground that General Caldwell had vacated to support the 3rd Corps, which was done promptly. However, the number of troops collected was quite small, barely equal to an ordinary battalion, composed of fragments from many shattered regiments. 3 guns from one of its batteries had been left on the field due to losses in men and horses. I positioned Colonel Willard's brigade at the point where General Birney's division had retreated, facing the advancing enemy. With no other troops on either side, the brigade soon engaged in combat, resulting in the loss of its commander, Colonel Willard, along with many officers and men. At this critical moment, reinforcements I had previously requested from General Meade arrived. These reinforcements included parts of General Newton's Corps, Doubleday's division, and remnants of Robinson's command. They established themselves on the line and immediately engaged the enemy effectively. As I moved along the line, I encountered an enemy regiment whose column was passing through an unprotected gap in our defenses. A fringe of undergrowth allowed us to approach close to our lines without being noticed. It was during this advance that my aide, Captain Miller, was wounded twice. Just then, the 1st Minnesota Regiment arrived and charged the Confederate regiment with great success, capturing its colors and driving it back in disarray. I cannot commend this regiment and its commander enough for their performance during the attack and their subsequent advance against the enemy, which resulted in 3/4 of their officers and men being lost. A regiment from the Vermont Brigade later advanced on their right and successfully retook guns from a reserve battery that had been abandoned by its cannoneers and supports. The enemy was now attacking our entire front at various points on the right, advancing from the direction of the Brick House on Emmitsburg Road toward Gibbon's division. They were quickly halted and pushed back from that area where Brown's battery had been temporarily captured. In this operation, the 19th Maine under Colonel F.E. Heath played a significant role. On the left side of the 2nd Corps, where gaps still existed that allowed enemy approaches to our line of battle, General Meade personally brought up part of the 12th Corps, consisting of 2 regiments from Lockwood's brigade under Brigadier General H.H. Lockwood. They formed a line and advanced against the enemy, who were closely engaged with us. The enemy was soon driven from the field by these regiments' advance and artillery that had been recaptured from them. Humphreys' division participated in this advance and helped reclaim its guns. Brigadier General Boxdale of the Confederate forces was left mortally wounded on the field. The 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Division, led by Colonel Sherrill after Colonel Willard's death, made a brave advance against enemy batteries to the right of the Brick House, with notable contributions from the 111th New York Volunteers under Colonel McDougall. This brigade suffered nearly half its strength in casualties. As darkness approached near Cemetery Hill, I heard heavy fighting on General Howard's front. Believing it to be one of General Slocum's fronts and concerned that his troops might have left him insufficiently supported, I directed General Gibbon to send 2 regiments to that area. The 71st Pennsylvania, commanded by Colonel R. Penn Smith, and the 106th Pennsylvania, under Lieutenant Colonel W. L. Curries, were dispatched but reported to Major General Howard upon arrival. The 106th Pennsylvania Volunteers remained until relieved the next day while performing admirably. The 71st returned to its command around midnight without orders after suffering some losses. Additionally, I want to highlight Battery C of the 4th U.S. Artillery, commanded by Lieutenant Evan Thomas for his bravery and good conduct during this time. A battery from the Artillery Reserve also supported our line during this action. Throughout the night of July 2nd, we supplied our batteries with ammunition as much as possible, despite only bringing half our ammunition train. We relied somewhat on others for supplies. The artillery ammunition was supplemented by that from the Artillery Reserve train, but not fully sufficient for our needs. For details regarding the important service provided by the 1st Division of the 2nd Corps while it was detached in the afternoon of July 2nd, I refer you to Brigadier General Caldwell's clear report included herewith. Between 500 and 600 prisoners were captured by this division during that occasion. The Corps had suffered such heavy losses on July 2nd that on July 3rd it required every available man to hold its previous positions. Colonel Carroll's brigade from General Hayes's division was retained by General Howard and did not engage with the 2nd Corps during that day except for a few members from the 8th Ohio. The early morning passed quietly along our front, but heavy and continuous firing on the right indicated that the enemy was focusing their efforts on the 12th Corps. Minor skirmishes occurred intermittently between enemy and our skirmishers, while our artillery engaged the enemy frequently and effectively. From 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., there was an unsettling stillness. Around 1 o'clock, seemingly by a signal, the enemy unleashed the heaviest artillery fire I had ever witnessed. Their guns were positioned approximately 1,400 yards from my line, forming a semicircle from Gettysburg to a point opposite Round Top Mountain. Estimates of their number ranged from 115 to 150. The air filled with projectiles, with multiple bursts visible at once. The terrain offered little protection, and the area behind our line of battle was quickly cleared of anything movable. The infantry held their ground steadily, using makeshift defenses they had constructed and the natural features of the land to shield themselves. There was hardly a sign of faltering. All awaited the cessation of the fierce cannonade, fully aware of what it foreshadowed. Our Corps' artillery, though poorly supplied with ammunition, gallantly responded to the enemy's fire, maintaining an unequal contest that reflected great credit on this branch of service. Brown's Battery B of the 1st Rhode Island had suffered heavily earlier and exhausted its canister shots. It withdrew before the cannonade ended, unable to continue effective service. The remaining batteries kept firing until they had only canister left and then ceased. After an hour and 45 minutes, the enemy's fire diminished, and we soon saw their infantry in the woods beyond Emmitsburg Road preparing for an assault. A strong line of skirmishers advanced, followed by 2 deployed lines of battle. Supported at various points by small columns of infantry, their lines were formed with precision and steadiness that drew admiration from witnesses of this significant moment. The left flank of the enemy extended slightly beyond General Alexander Hayes's division's right, while their right was roughly opposite General Gibbon's left. The enemy's battle line covered a front of no more than 2 small incomplete divisions of our Corps. The entire attacking force is estimated to have exceeded 15,000 men. No attempt was made to halt the enemy's advance until they were within 700 yards of our position. At that point, a weak artillery fire was opened against them, but this had no significant effect and did not delay their determined advance, which immediately returned our fire. Our men showed a notable reluctance to fire until they could do so with deadly effect. 2 regiments from Stannard's Vermont Brigade of the 1st Corps, positioned in a small grove in front of and at an angle to the main line, first opened an oblique fire on the right of the enemy's column. This maneuver caused the enemy troops on that flank to shift slightly toward their left. However, they continued to press forward without halting to return fire. Our rifled artillery, having exhausted all canister shots, was either withdrawn or left inactive on the ground to await the outcome of the infantry struggle. When the enemy troops reached a distance of 200 to 300 yards, they were met by devastating fire from Gibbon's and Hayes's divisions, which they promptly returned. The fighting quickly escalated into a fierce and general engagement. In front of Hayes's division, the confrontation did not last long. The enemy was mowed down by canister fire from Woodruff's battery and by 2 regiments strategically positioned by General Hayes at his extreme front and right. The enemy also faced fire from different lines in the rear, causing them to break in great disorder and leaving behind 15 colors and nearly 2,000 prisoners in the hands of this division. Those enemy troops that did not retreat in disarray from the front of the 3rd Division moved right and reinforced the line attacking Gibbon's division. The right flank of the attacking line was repulsed by Hall's and Harrow's brigades from Gibbon's division, aided by fire from the aforementioned Vermont regiments. The attacking line doubled back to its left and also reinforced its center, thus launching an attack with full strength against General Webb's opposite brigades. This brigade was arranged in 2 lines, with 2 regiments, the 69th and 71st Pennsylvania Volunteers, positioned behind a low stone wall and a slight breastwork hastily constructed by them for protection. The remainder of the brigade was positioned behind the crest, about 60 paces to the rear, and arranged to fire over the heads of those in front. As the enemy's line, led by General Armistead, neared the stone wall, most of Webb's brigade stationed there abandoned their positions, but fortunately did not retreat entirely. Thanks to the personal bravery of General Webb and his officers, they were quickly reformed behind the previously mentioned crest, which was occupied by the remnant of the brigade. Emboldened by this apparent weakness, the enemy advanced more boldly, with many crossing over the breastwork abandoned by our troops. The fighting became very close and deadly at this point. Soon, enemy battle flags were seen waving on the stone wall. At this time, Colonel Devereux, commanding the 19th Massachusetts Volunteers, eager to be in the right position, requested permission to move his regiment to the right and front where the line had been broken. I granted this request, and his regiment, along with Colonel Malone's 42nd New York Volunteers on his right, proceeded there immediately. However, having left Colonel Hall's front as previously described, this officer promptly moved his command by the right flank to further reinforce General Webb's position, and was soon followed by Harrow's brigade. This movement was executed, but not without confusion, as many men left their ranks to fire at the enemy from the breastwork. The situation became quite peculiar. Men from all brigades had somewhat lost their regimental organization, but remained firm individually. The ambition of individual commanders to cover points penetrated by the enemy, combined with the smoke of battle and intensity of close engagement, caused this confusion. However, our line was now covered. In regular formation, it would have stood 4 ranks deep. Colors from different regiments advanced, waving defiantly against the long line of enemy battle flags. The men pressed firmly after them under the energetic commands and examples set by their officers. After a few moments of desperate fighting, enemy troops were repulsed. They threw down their arms and sought safety either in flight or by dropping to the ground to escape our fire. The battle flags were now ours, and victory was achieved. Gibbon's division secured 12 stands of colors and captured enough prisoners to increase the total taken by our corps to about 4,500. While the enemy was still in front of Gibbon's division, I directed Colonel Stannard to send 2 regiments from his Vermont Brigade of the 1st Corps to strike at the enemy's right flank. I cannot report on how well this order was executed, since Colonel Stannard's report has not yet passed through my hands. However, based on these troops' good conduct during direct action, I have no doubt that they performed their service promptly and effectively, contributing to increasing panic among fleeing enemies. Battery K of the 5th U.S. Artillery, commanded by Lieutenant Kinsey, along with Fitzhugh's New York Battery, arrived and opened fire on them. The enemy's attack was weakly renewed immediately after their first repulse. A single line of battle advanced with its left nearly aligned with that of previous lines. This force numbered about 3,000 men, but was utterly broken by fire from batteries on my left before reaching musketry range. Many enemy soldiers surrendered as soon as their line broke. 2 stands of colors fell into our hands. This significant victory came at a cost. In addition to previous losses mentioned earlier, several regimental commanders were killed. Colonel Dennis O'Kane of the 69th Pennsylvania Volunteers, Lieutenant Colonel Max A. Toman of the 59th New York Volunteers, Colonel Richard P. Roberts of the 140th Pennsylvania Volunteers, Colonel P. J. Revere of the 20th Massachusetts, and Lieutenant Colonel Steele of the 7th Michigan Volunteers. The number of casualties among field officers was substantial. Many regiments lost all their leaders. Towards the end of this main contest, I unfortunately lost distinguished officers' valuable services as well. Brigadier General John Gibbon, commanding 2nd Division, was severely wounded. Shortly afterward, I myself was wounded, but managed to stay on the field until action concluded completely when I transferred command to Brigadier General Caldwell. The artillery service during this engagement received particular commendation in reports from its commander. Its losses in officers and material clearly reflect how severe this ordeal was. 3 battery commanders, Captain Rorty and Lieutenants A.H. Cushing and G.H. Woodruff, were all able and distinguished officers who were killed. Another battery commanded by Lieutenant T.F. Brown from Rhode Island Artillery suffered severe wounding as well. The Corps' total losses during actions at Gettysburg amounted to 4,323 officers and men killed, wounded, or missing out of a strength of about 10,000 officers and men engaged in action. A detailed statement of losses is enclosed here for your review. While it may seem unnecessary to comment on troop conduct during battle engagements like these due to their well-earned reputation across many fields previously fought upon, it is worth noting that this Corps continues its legacy intact under its gallant first commander, late Major General E.V. Selmer, who asserted that 2nd Corps had never surrendered a gun or color to enemies, holds true now, just as it did under my predecessor, Major Gen Couch's command. To attest to its good conduct and the perils it faced, it can be stated that its losses in battle were greater than any other corps in the Army of the Potomac, or possibly in the entire service. Despite this, it has often been numerically the weakest. For the service of the division commanders, Brigadier General John Gibbons, Alexander Hayes, and John C. Caldwell, I need only refer to the history of their command's deeds. Brigadier General John Gibbons and Alexander Hayes were particularly under my observation during the battle's crisis, so it is only fair to mention that their conduct was all that could be desired from division commanders. Captain J.G. Hazard, commanding the Corps' artillery, performed his duties commendably. He exhibited gallantry on the field and directed his artillery with skill and judgment. I want to highlight the service of a brave young officer, First Lieutenant F.A. Haskell, aide-de-camp to Brigadier General Gibbons. At a critical moment when the opposing forces were only 50 to 60 yards apart, he believed an example was necessary and was ready to sacrifice his life. He rode between the contending lines to encourage our troops and lead them forward, being the only mounted officer in that position at that moment. He was slightly wounded, and his horse was shot multiple times. Brigadier General Webb, Colonel N.J. Hall, commanding brigade, Colonel Devereux of the 19th Massachusetts, Colonel Malone of the 42nd New York, Colonel R. Penn Smith of the 71st Pennsylvania, and others whom I regret I cannot name, also performed distinguished service by leading their men forward at a critical time in the contest. Captain Hall of the 53rd Pennsylvania Volunteers and Lieutenant Taylor from Central Corps deserve mention for their energy and usefulness throughout the battle. For officers who distinguished themselves but are not mentioned here, I respectfully refer you to reports from division, brigade, and regimental commanders, as well as the report from the commander of artillery included herewith. I particularly want to bring to Major General Commanding's attention Sergeant Frederick Fugger, 1st Sergeant of Battery A, 4th U.S. Artillery. His conduct during this action on July 3rd entitles him to promotion. His character makes this a fitting way to reward his services. Attached is a tabular statement of casualties incurred during this engagement as well. Regarding the number of colors taken from the enemy, it is proper to state that each division is credited with those actually turned in for which receipts are held, totaling an aggregate of 27 colors captured. There were undoubtedly 33 colors taken. I have the honor to be very respectfully your obedient servant, Winfield Scott Hancock, Major General commanding 2nd Corps Army of the Potomac. As the dust settled over the battlefield of Gettysburg, the echoes of gunfire gave way to an uneasy silence, leaving behind a landscape scarred by sacrifice and steeped in controversy. Major General Winfield Scott Hancock's report stands as a haunting testament to the chaos that ensued when leadership faltered at a critical juncture in American history. The staggering losses, over 4,300 men, tell a story not just of valor, but of missed opportunities and strategic blunders that could have altered the course of the war. Yet, as we reflect on Hancock's revelations, one question looms larger than the battlefield itself. How can we reconcile the heroism displayed by individual soldiers with the failures of those at the helm? Were these men merely pawns in a game dictated by flawed leadership, or did their courage illuminate paths that could have led to victory? This narrative compels us to reconsider our understanding of leadership in times of crisis. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about accountability and decision-making in the heat of battle. As we close this chapter on Gettysburg, we invite you to ponder. What lessons can we draw from Hancock's account, and how do they resonate in our own lives today? The echoes of Gettysburg still call out for answers. Will we heed their call,